Hello, everyone. It's Al and Stacy bringing another podcast presentation on fourth level conversations. We're glad to be with you. Good morning, Al.
Morning, brother. I don't know if anybody ever listens to these, but even if they don't, I so enjoy getting to be with you once a week or so whenever we're not busy on trips or whatever. It's always a delight for us to at least have a recording of this. So in 5 or 10 years, when we're too senile to be able to find our shoes, I can come back and watch it and remember, oh, remember when I used to be lucid and be able to spend time with my friend Stacy?
I'm not sure it's going to be that long, Al. Sometimes I can find one shoe, but not the other one.
You know, we were talking this morning, Stace, about a topic today that I think is one that visits everybody at some point in life, and it seems like some people live constantly with it. And it's one of the great, I think, linchpins of people's experience in life of whether or not they are suffering or they're enjoying life. And it's around this issue that is so promoted these days in social media of self-esteem. So I thought it might be interesting for us to invite our viewers and listeners into a conversation around this whole area of self-esteem. What is it? Why is it a problem for people? Who has it? Who doesn't have it? And what really is it all about? Why do we have this tenuous relationship with self-esteem? So why don't you start us off and tell us what self-esteem is, Stacy?
Sometimes when somebody asks me what something is, I think about what it isn't, kind of the opposite. And I think people could say, well, the opposite of self-esteem is self-doubt, but maybe not. Maybe that's the same as low self-esteem. But I think that it comes back to all of our conversations, Al. I think when I start thinking about my own self-esteem, I shared with you this morning, I woke up thinking about my own, and not in the sense of that is it high or low, but what role does it play in my life and in two ways, my effectiveness in life with others, and then also my enjoyment of life. And, I think I've tried to be a humble person all of my life. And I think sometimes and when I say people, I mean me, we can have this sense of false humility that I don't want to be arrogant or boastful. And I think about skills or accomplishments or just things that where something really works, that it would be easy to say, oh, look how great I am and look what I did. And so I might equate that to a high self-esteem, but then maybe it's pride. And so I think it always comes back to what we talk about is our level 3 ego identity versus our level 4 soul identity. And self-esteem probably means something to our level 3 ego. And when we surpass that and step above that, we probably have high self-esteem and aren't cognizant of it because it's not something we're thinking about. And so as I was thinking about this, I was like, I know there's times where I've just felt like, man, I've got this mastered or whatever it may be. And those are times where I think I've just stepped outside of my own self and selfishness and just focused on the people in the world that I'm involved with and trying to help them. And somehow these God-given skills come through and have some meaning to that other person. And those are the feelings of the highest self-esteem that I can recall in my life. And it is always a revolving around it had a positive impact on somebody else. It's no secret I love to play golf, and every once in a while I'll shoot a really low score, around par, maybe even under par. And for a moment, maybe my chest pumps up, says, "Look what I did today," and it lasts for about 5 minutes, and then it means nothing. My life didn't change in whether I shot 72 or I shot 82. It didn't change. Maybe the fun for the last 4 hours was different, but. So I'm not sure I'm defining self-esteem very well, but to me, it's understanding, first of all, that your life is a gift and you're precious. And so there's no reason to beat ourselves up, have self-doubt. We've been given all the tools by the Creator, in my opinion, to handle all circumstances if we'll just allow that to happen and have faith in God to see us through whatever situations they may be. But then understand that the ability to do that was given to us. It wasn't something that we manufactured on our own. And I think that's when true humility comes out, is that when we can truly live up to those skills that we've been given and give the glory elsewhere and have the focus elsewhere. And that's when I think self-esteem is at the highest. And so when I think about self-esteem, it's, to me, it's when there's low self-esteem, right? I'm beating myself up, or I'm suffering, or I don't have confidence in my abilities, or I don't think I'm worth anything. And I think the whole world's suffering from that, of course. And so self-esteem is, I think, an intellectual and heart issue around our level 3 ego. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's right on target by my way of thinking. I think it's, first of all, it's a mislabel. We call it self-esteem. I believe it's actually ego-esteem. And I think it's level 3 esteem based out of the false and superficial belief that who we are these bodies, these personalities, and these accomplishments. And I think we are raised in such a way that we're given these ideal standards of what we need to look like, act like, accomplish. And so we live our lives trying to live up to this set of standards that others have put into us, parents, teachers, whoever. And we very rarely ever achieve that. You might look at Elon Musk or some Albert Einstein, somebody who's accomplished a lot, and you may be surprised they don't particularly feel like they are all that special. Whereas I think self-esteem is a feeling of self-worth and of how special you are in the eyes of others, so you can be so in the eyes of yourself. And these days, it's very popular with therapists. I find this is an issue, particularly with women. And now I think it's true for men and women, and maybe they just mask it, men do or something. But I think in our society today, there's a tremendous emphasis on self-esteem. So every kid gets a ribbon for participating out of the belief that that's going to create self-esteem. Short term, it might that first time. But after a child grows up enough to realize that this race or this contest I'm in is supposed to be a measure of accomplishment, but everybody's getting recognized the same, it ends up undermining the drive to actually be special, because if you can just cruise, why bother? It's kind of the difference between capitalism and communism, but that's another day. That's another topic. And so the reason I thought this would be a good topic this morning, Stacy, is I had an interesting experience yesterday. I was doing a group coaching with 50, 60 people on a virtual deal. And there was a woman that spoke up. We were processing, issues. And there's a woman that spoke up who you could tell was just tortured. And older, probably 50, 60-year-old woman. And I asked everybody to identify a value that they wanted their life to be remembered by, and to try that value as their filter for reality and for their life for the next 24 hours. And then I asked people to pick a time in your life that was the worst moment of your life. And this lady sort of spoke up and said, well, every day is, because I have a real problem with self-worth. And so we got into a discussion about self-worth. And yet I could see other people in the group chat were saying, you are incredible. I always know when I send you a file to close, it's always get da-da-da. And so it had me starting to think about patterns I see in my clients and in my life of people that suffer from self-esteem issues, low self-esteem, which I think is what really robs people of the energy to try to do things or believe in themselves. And Stacy, I often find that the very best people among us are the ones with the lowest self-esteem. It's that scene in Schindler's List, the movie, that I so revere. At the end of the movie, where he has saved 1,200 lives to turn into 40,000 Israelis or whatever it is at the end. And at the end, there are people telling him, you are a miracle worker. You're an angel. Look at what you did. And he starts crying, saying, no, this watch could have saved 3 more lives. That car. And so that scene, for some reason, was so poignant for me, because I realized this man, who was literally a saint that saved lives, still wasn't able to believe he did enough. And while that's interesting, it's also telling as to, I think, how ego-esteem that we confuse as self-esteem is never satisfied. It's what the Buddhists may call a hungry ghost, that is a ghost with no stomach that no matter how much they consume can never be satiated. That's what ego-esteem is like, or self-esteem is like. One more thought, and then I'll shut up and let you kind of respond here to what you think of all this. I even found myself wondering this morning in the shower whether low self-esteem isn't a sign of a very advanced soul that is going through a spiritual gift by having them realize they are alienated from themselves, and if they objectively added up their intentionality, their actions, their accomplishments, and how overall they were probably kinder, gentler, more loving, more giving, generous, compassionate than other people. But maybe that's the way God or the Creator has us begin to recognize that our ego is not to be trusted and therefore isn't even who we are, and has us start to explore we are something more. So I kind of wonder if self-esteem issues aren't sort of part of the way station in this journey back to coming to know who we really are. That's actually a dark night of the soul that God gives us to have us start to separate from the illusion of us being this self that is our ego, as opposed to this maybe even non-self that is a soul that's a part of God and a part of everything. What are your thoughts about all that?
Well, it's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it occurred to me as you were describing that is that maybe that's the design from the begin, that there has to be some level of suffering and pain in a human being to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I think about just about everything that I've ever learned outside of a school room and a book. It's because of the hardships or the challenges. And I think sometimes the danger for people is that they don't have a guide out of it. Maybe they end up in that suffering, but they don't have a guide, and so they diminish further than needed to be. I think that maybe that helps lead to suicides and other types of depression. I'm not sure, but it's. I was thinking about your description of the person who was talking about low self-worth and the colleagues saying, "You're awesome. You do amazing work for us. You always help." And maybe that she just hadn't, again, maybe it's her learning phase, right? But it could also be that she's just never had the kind of guides to build that self-worth. And I think that's I see in today's society with young kids, perhaps something that happened in Georgia yesterday, that somewhere along the line, they were not given that assurance of their worth.
Right.
And then, gosh, just watching high schoolers. I think high schoolers and teenagers are some of the most brutal souls walking around in how they treat others.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bullying and hardship that goes on, even amongst best friends. I see it with people I know. And so I think maybe there's a role that anybody that might be listening to this, that has had success in their life, that has enjoyed the beauties of someone reassuring them of their self-worth and so forth, that there comes a responsibility and an opportunity to help others through that. I think about anybody that's probably watching this, Russ. In the history of the world and the world today, we are blessed beyond any imagination. And with that, if we can move beyond that ego esteem to level 4 soul and understanding what you were describing, that we're a part of a much grander thing. We aren't who we think we are. And Al, the more that we spend time together and the more I've read on my own and some other things, I think that's the greatest mystery of this life, is that we get defined by our careers, by our relationships. Did our marriage last forever? Did it not? All those standards you were talking to start with that human beings have placed upon us. And we should strive for excellence, right? I have no doubt about that. But it's not who we are. I believe that we were created by a creator. For me, the name is God, and with a beautiful purpose and a part of a grander scheme than whether I have enough money in the bank or a bigger house or enough cars or enough experiences on travel and so forth. That's really not who we are. And we have an opportunity, if we will just allow ourselves to step beyond our ego esteem, to see things that I don't think a lot of human beings have ever really seen.
Mm.
And I think you have been an enlightenment for me during that journey, and hopefully we are being that for other people too.
Well, you raise a lot of great additional variables that need to be looked at, I think. One is we are social creatures.
Hmm.
And in this adolescent phase of middle school and high school, when people can be most cruel, they're also most sensitive because that's entering into level 3 identity, where we're trying to formulate what our adult identity is going to be outside the confines of our child's identity under our parents' roof and their expectations for us. So we go into middle school, high school, and we simultaneously develop pubescence, we develop the sex drive. And out of that, we now have this urge to want to kind of be attractive to a certain category of people, opposite sex, same sex, whatever it is. And so we start to, I believe this is a big piece of level 3 identity, is we begin to live our lives outside the in by taking in what other people think about us. And then we start anticipating what they are thinking about us based upon how we look or what my accomplishment, how smart am I, how pretty am I, how handsome am I, all that, how likable am I? Because that then tells us how much I can believe that I am pretty or likable or whatever. And so we start to live our lives outside the in, and simultaneously in the same phase of life, we start to experiment out of this innate drive nature's given us for independence, to have the apple drop away from the tree. And so we start to violate the rules that we were told we had to follow in level 2 identity in childhood. And now we start to feel shame and guilt. So we start to build a trunk over in the corner of shame and guilt. And as this continues in life, I think it's only meant to be a phase of life. And then I think you get into your 30s and 40s, it's time to evolve into level 4 identity, but most people don't know it exists. They think, in other words, I think most people at 50, 60, 70 are just advanced, more sophisticated versions of that same insecure kid they were in middle school. And and it's ironic because people by that measure of self-esteem as thought of as ego-esteem are the people that have the highest self-esteem we generally despise as arrogant and as thinking they're special, and we resent that. And so it's kind of a can't win thing when it comes to, if your ego is your identity, if you don't have a problem with low self-esteem, you're deemed to be. It's honestly, Stacy, one of the things I most admire about you and why I'm so grateful we've come into relationship in a real close way in the last year, after knowing each other for 30 years across the room, but never really knowing each other. I think the thing that impresses me most about you isn't that you can, shoot par or less on the golf course. That's incredible to me. Or how you've been blessed with a very handsome body. You've always been a handsome man. You could have been a model in my mind. I always saw this handsome dude across the room that, like, sort of like had to wear sunglasses. It was too blindingly perfect.
Yeah, right.
You had huge accomplishments in the workplace. You were always liked. You were a man of faith. You had a great degree of following from other people. And you had such a case for being, frankly, who I assumed you probably were, that was just masquerading as a Christian. I figured this guy must be an arrogant egocentrist, because how could you have everything he's got that I don't have and be real? And brother, I apologize in front of whoever watches this, because I so misjudge you out of my ego insecurities, because your most impressive feature to me is your humility. And that doesn't mean you have low self-esteem. To me, it means you have a great understanding as to the fallacy of you being how you look, your accomplishments. We know, you've seen in your life, I've seen in mine, that all comes and goes with time. It's all transitory. What matters is this conversation, this connection, this friendship, and what we have with people that watch this, that we're here for a temporary time. And if we waste it trying to run for the office of approvability in other people's minds, who are just as lost and insecure as we are, that's a fool's errand that most people follow. But if we could just pause and take the time to say, look, everybody I see is really a part of me at a larger dimension. I don't I don't particularly believe people go to heaven or hell because I have trouble believing that anyone could be permanently sent to hell in a loving universe where I think the divine, I think God is overall a benevolent entity that's going to evolve us. So there'll be suffering along the way, but I think that we all eventually recognize one another as souls and a part of one another and a part of God. And we just start dealing with the amnesia of thinking we're individual egos. Just my belief, doesn't mean everybody else believes it. But I think it's what actually exalts you, Stacy, is not your accomplishments, but your humility despite your accomplishments. To me, that's one of the single greatest measures of where people are on the mountain of spiritual understanding and consciousness is not what the world is saying to applaud them, but who they're being anyway in their continued drive to understand more and to be a better and better example of what the larger architecture of love and compassion and faith is in the shared connection with all beings. And I therefore think that you are somebody who is a teacher for a lot of people because you've been through some stuff. And I think what you've done, at least in my experience of you, is you've learned how we need to evolve away from this outside the in living that we create in adolescence and develop an inside to out way of living that notices when people think this way or that of us, good or bad, but really is sort of indifferent to that, realizing that's just their movie, their trip, their story about me. They don't know me. They don't know what I'm really like. And so this is my chance to apologize and acknowledge I am shamed by the fact that I ever saw you as less than who you actually are, which is a force for good in this world, a force of light. And I think you've been given the gifts you've been given, and then on top of it, have the consciousness of humility that you have as a teacher and a warning for all of us not to sell out to the baubles and the trinkets of mere superficiality that defines ego-based existence outside the in and defines why we have suffering that creates still more suffering unless we move past it. What's your thoughts about all that, brother?
Oh my gosh, I could talk with you for 3 hours about what we just discussed because when you were across the room and I was thinking about you, what came to my mind, and I shared this with you a year ago when I called you out of the blue, I saw you as peace and freedom because I saw you as wise and calm and grounded and unpretentious. And I saw you as a person that had this high self-esteem and didn't even know you had it. And so for me, it was the opposite is that I thought of you and I think I was fearful of calling you sooner because I'd get exposed, right? That maybe I wasn't as grounded and wise and humble and genuine. The reality is in business, I think for some people, there's a lot of games that get played and there's a lot of posing that happens. And I'm just honestly, I did it too. And the reason is sometimes when maybe we see this in politics today, but when you speak the truth, you can be judged as not being a team player or being a know-it-all and all those things. And so then you go along to get along, right? And I'm certain I did that for a large part of my career. And silently, it probably looked like that helped my self-esteem, but it probably was chipping away at it actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you're describing all of that, I'm sitting here thinking the message that people maybe need to know is your self-esteem is not, your worth is not tied to your success in business. I don't think your worth is tied to your success in relationships. I spent 33 years in a marriage and it ended. And I promised myself for all of those 30 years it never would. And yet it did. And is there shame and guilt and all that? Initially, more now it's just sadness that it occurred. And now it's like, how can I help others maybe lean in sooner so it doesn't get to the point where mine did. But I think it's that any hardship, you get fired from your job. I have a buddy yesterday that I worked with, was at the same company I was for 16 years and was let go after 16 years in the same company, in the same industry you and I served. And, that industry's gone through a lot, Al, but it's like he could be at a stage today where he's wondering if he was really all that good. Why could this happen to him? And so I'm going to be there for him to say, man, look at everything that you did.
He needs you to put him through your program, brother.
Yeah. But the thing is that this physical life and the gift of that, but the soul, and we may have different opinions about heaven and hell and other things. That, you know what, Al? It doesn't matter, because you and I are on a journey of love together.
Right.
And I respect your thoughts. And I also know that in my mind, I'm pretty certain about what I believe because of my faith. I'm also pretty certain when it's all over, I could be wrong.
Me too.
So, I'm going to try to live that faith the way I think I'm being led to do it. But at the end of the day, it's all messed up if I have judgments of others with different opinions. Then my faith and my life is all false. And so as we were thinking about all this, I think there's so many people that get wrapped up in the success of their careers, or they're living vicariously through their children and so forth. And it's natural to do that. I'm sure we've all done it, but it all is fleeting. I spent 40 years in the mortgage industry. You know what I've realized, Al? That industry's not missing me one bit. It's still going on. There are still transactions happening. People are growing. People are buying homes, although it might be more difficult right now. But I wasn't all that important. Do I think I made a difference for the souls that I was interacting with? I pray so. I know you did, because I watched it. But it's not a definition of me. It's so interesting, because I think people think that once you've spent so much time doing one thing that you probably can't do anything else and be successful. And you and I know for certain that's just not true. And it's a journey. And I think that the self-esteem that people are seeking, or ego-esteem, it's something that I think ultimately causes suffering. And again, maybe it causes learning, and it's something we all have to go through. But I think you become enlightened when all that stuff can still happen and you're still okay. And that's where I am.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think what we owe the viewers, listeners of this podcast is, okay, now we process what we think of this thing called self-esteem as ego-esteem, or where we see it.
Right.
What people really want to know is, how do I not be limited or ravaged when I operate from that place, which I do a lot of the time, maybe most of the time, even if the world doesn't see it. And it's been the great blessing of my life to solve what I call existential angst, which I think is this awareness that we have as humans that we are temporary, we're mortal. And I think that is a dread that our ego carries, because it doesn't want to be extinguished. And yet it knows, logically, looking around, people die. I just found out this morning a doctor I had died, that's my age. And so people die. I'm going to die. And that becomes an overwhelming issue for people that I think is the root of fear and worry and anxiety about, am I squeezing the juice out of it? Do I understand why I was even here before it's over? And for me, brother, that has changed, and that's been the great blessing of my life. And the way it changed was I reinterpreted what Christ was saying, what Buddha was saying, what the holy ones were saying. When Christ is talking about love your enemies, or turn the other cheek, or give them your cloak, that to an ego sounds crazy, because if you do that, now you have nothing, they have everything you had. That's antithetical to survival, which is the ego's deal. But what I found is that when you can live life inside to out of a personal life vision,
Right.
that are the core values that I believe your soul came here to discover, grow, and give others an experience of in this brief physical sojourn of this eternal journey you're on. When you give others that experience of those values without what's in it for me, that's where peace lies. Because the only time I find self-esteem is when I forget that I'm a self.
Yeah.
And the only time I forget that is when I'm truly about others without an agenda of what's in it for me, which
Yeah.
is why I've said for 25 years, my goal in life is, and I know I not only will never do it, I'm not sure that I've even scratched the surface of effectively influencing it. I want to save the frigging world and die anonymously, right? Well, what's that mean? It means I don't want people to suffer.
Right.
Now, who am I to say that? Maybe that's part of the divine design, but I still think it's my job and your job and we're all of our job to help other people learn to trust life despite the
Right.
presence of this existential angst. And truly, brother, the first time in my life I have felt a sense of self-acceptance and self-love is when I left behind the false self of my ego in favor of operating as a force for good in the lives of others to the best of my very flawed and limited ability without wondering what's in it for me. Now, do I have to charge people as a coach and a trainer? Yes, I got to make a living and it's given me a beautiful living. But far more important than that on my deathbed is going to be if I was able to help even a single other human being have even a moment in life where they trusted life a little more as a result of our interface. To me, that experience is love, and love is the experience of God while we're in human form. So ultimately, the only way to find peace around this issue of self-esteem is to leave behind the artificial self of ego in favor of giving the best of your heart and your soul toward others to lift them out of suffering. And honestly, if I could, there's one more and then I'll shut up and
No.
let you respond to this.
More.
There's a beautiful phrase in Buddhism that says, if I saw someone suffering in hell and by being replaced in hell, they could be in heaven, I would give my life in an instant to take their place so they could be in heaven. Well, to me, that's a very Christ-like ideal, and I think it's an ideal to live up to. I think it's the Marine diving on the grenade that has a wife and kid back home, but he's never going to see again, but he's saving his buddy's life. There are things in this life that matter more than how much money I have, how good I look, how many times I'm having sex, whatever. And I think it's this conversation we're having, Stacy, this pure connection with another person that these are the moments when I no longer fear death because these are the moments when I kiss the angel's wings and I can taste eternity in just the moment itself of connection with another person in a state of pure heart, love, and intentionality. And honestly, it's why I'm grateful for our relationship because you allow me to at least try to do that for you and for other people. And while it may seem like you're going to be a beneficiary, I'm the very most benefited by it because I get to leave behind what Jack Kerouac used to call old hateful me, which was
Mm.
my ego. What's
Mm.
your thoughts about all that, brother?
Lots. So you started that little session talking about what can you do about your self-esteem and so forth. And so I've got a couple of suggestions too. First of all, get both of Al's books and read them. Seriously, that will help you. That will begin to open your intellect to why perhaps you've experienced some of the suffering and pain in your life around this concept of your ego identity. The next thing is that I've learned in this later stage in my life is be careful about isolation.
Mm.
If you are alone a lot, which I have had the opportunity to be, if you're not careful, that level 3 ego can begin to tell you lies about yourself, about the world,
Mm,
about your worth. And if you don't have that
mm,
counterbalance of other souls
mm,
interacting with you regularly, reminding you that that isn't true, which I'm blessed to
mm,
have Al for that and others.
mm,
But isolation is a dangerous thing. Now, you can be around a lot of people and still be in isolation. And what that means is you have to be willing to open up. You know what I was thinking about when you're talking about your group of 50 and this woman speaking up? Bravo. You have some of the highest self-esteem I can think of, the fact that you spoke up and said something.
Right.
Because people with low self-esteem and low self-worth will hide behind it. They're too afraid to be exposed because there's still too much posing to do, particularly in a peer group like that. I mean, that to me is awesome. And I don't know if she'll see this. Maybe she will after your interaction, but she should be so excited about the fact that she had the courage to do that.
Yep.
Because most people don't. So be careful about isolation, even if you're around a lot of people, but make sure that you have relationships where you can say, Al, this day is crappy for me, and this is what I'm thinking. And by the way, Al and I can do that for you. And so if you don't have those close relationships, reach out to us and we'll help in whatever manner we can help, because we value you like Buddha would the soul in hell. We value your life. And if we didn't, we wouldn't be doing this. We don't do this because there's something in it for us. We want to have an impact on people's lives. This is awesome, Al. I love these kind of conversations, and it's outside of the scope of normality, right? I mean, I was thinking about our conversation and every conversation we have, and I thought about the political world we're in today, and I wonder what our world would be like if our politicians on any side were seeing the world the way we're talking about it. It'd be different.
Yeah. Well, and sadly, I'm not sure that given the way things have evolved, the kind of people that would seek that level of power, and the ones that have, I mean, frankly, I think Jimmy Carter is arguably one of the best human beings who ever occupied the White House, but objectively was one of the least effective presidents in my mind, right? And so something about the political structure isn't necessarily going to be in sync with the quality of an individual's nobility. But I'm with you, Stacy. I'm grateful we have these.
Maybe just a little bit more.
Yeah, well, apparently you have a little time. Why don't you run for office? I'm here, first one to announce Stacy Harding for president, 2028. Here we go.
Nice. They would look at me and go, "Really?" I think I could count on at least 4 or 5 votes.
Well, you got mine. Listen, this is a valuable conversation today, folks. So whoever's watching this, I hope you reconsider this meme that's out there in society that do you have high self-esteem, low self-esteem? I distrust the whole issue. Now, I will say there's a caveat to that. When you have a child that has been abused, maybe molested, maybe beat, maybe psychologically abused, and you undermine fundamentally their ability to ever trust life because they can't trust themselves because they feel they did something wrong, that is evil and that is tragic. And that is a true case where other methods need to be deployed to help that person see that you are not your experiences and you are not the decisions that I actually had something happen like that where I was molested when I was 14 by a guy, and it weighed on me. And then it took years for me to realize that wasn't me. I was a 14-year-old kid that wanted some free alcohol, And so we need to help people that get that tough life start. We see them all the time. So I hope the bottom line people take away from this is compassion, and that includes self-compassion. I believe that I am worth whoever I am in the moment with the quality of intention I have toward you and toward anybody else. And that can change in the next moment if I become my selfish self that I've spent most of my life being. So Stacy and I are grateful that you've taken some time to watch this. And I would just like to close, and I'll let Stacy close it out with the idea for you to try on that you aren't who you think you are. You are. How could you possibly have the scope of consciousness you have to understand your own mortality and be merely a physical being? I'll leave it at that. May you and your loved ones give yourself a break and support one another in realizing that this is a short life and you have a chance to make it a more pleasant journey if you lift others up because they're already busy tearing themselves down.
Yeah.
Brother Stacy, I love you and I'm grateful we get to do these. Why don't you close it out for the folks?
Yeah, I love you too, Al. This fills our souls and fills our hearts. And I would just say to any of you, no matter what you may be going through today, just lean into faith. It will see you through. It will fill your heart.
Mm-hmm.
It will take you through any emotions that you may be experiencing, no matter what may be going on. And remember that no matter where you are in your life, there are people that love you. And if you'll just let them in, they'll help you. So we're glad to spend time with you. We bless you all. Thanks so much.
Beautiful. Bye-bye now.